So it's time for our big debate this hour. Are smart motorways in need of reform? Tomorrow, campaigners will carry 38 coffins across London to the Department of Transport headquarters, demanding that smart motorways be scrapped. Now, the coffins will represent the number of official deaths on the four-lane motorways between 2014 and 2019. The protest has been organised by Claire Mercer, whose husband Jason was killed on the M1 near Sheffield in 2019 when he was struck by a lorry. Well, I'm pleased to say that I'm joined now by Claire. Claire, thank you so much for talking to us. I want to talk to you a little bit about what happened with Jason, because some people, we've heard your name a lot now because you've been campaigning for a long time, but a lot of people may not know what actually happened.
No, well, he had a minor collision on the M1 near Sheffield, but they were at a sign that said no hard shoulder for 4 miles. And 2 years ago, we knew a lot less about smart motorways than we do now. So I don't even know if he knew what a smart motorway was. So the only information he had was this sign saying no hard shoulder for 4 miles. He couldn't see the emergency refuge area a mile out of sight. So they did the only thing they could do, because it's your legal obligation to stop. They pulled it over as far as they could in the first lane, but the crash barrier stopped them getting the vehicles totally out of the live running lane, and they themselves couldn't get over the barrier because it was a 30-foot drop onto the slip road below. And they were there for several minutes, exchanging details, taking photographs, and the technology that we're led to believe is there didn't pick them up. And they were hit by a lorry and killed instantly. But even then, 6 minutes they were dead on the road before the motorway was closed. And that was only because members of the public phoned in. So even when they were smashed across 4 lanes of a motorway, the technology did not pick them up. The technology just isn't capable of doing what it needs to do before they were killed and after. So they didn't stand a chance.
It is absolutely horrendous, because most people, when they get on the motorway, don't even check to see, oh, is there an extra lane? We just drive along.
Yeah.
As though, you know, don't even consider that your car could break down or something could happen. And if it did, what would you do?
Exactly. I mean, and new cars, they're more likely to stop because people think we've got newer cars now. You know, they're not cogs, but they're computers. And when a computer glitches, your car stops. There isn't a major manufacturer of vehicles that hasn't got a recall out for an electrical or computer-based problem at the moment. Every single major brand has got a recall out. Every single vehicle is capable of just stopping for absolutely no reason.
Now, you said that it said that there's no hard shoulder for 4 miles. I thought that there was a policy with smart motorways that they had to be within a certain distance, and that sounds too far apart.
Yes, well, that would be the emergency refuge areas, the ERAs, they call them. They were only meant to be 500 yards apart. In the pilot system, they were 500 yards apart, and that was what was signed off. And then they became a mile apart, and then they became a mile and a half apart. And in some places, the Highways England will tell you they're an average of 1.5 miles apart, but that just means in some places they're only a mile apart, and in other places they're 2.5 miles apart. So, and this, I think it's because at the time the smart motorway was quite new in that area. So they hadn't signposted the emergency refuge area. They just said that there was no hard shoulder for 4 miles because that's where the smart motorway ended. So not only have they fundamentally changed the motorway in this area, they'd got very poor signage. And actually before Jason's inquest, they did it before the inquest, they changed all the signage where he was killed because they realised that played a part in it.
It is just, the whole concept of it is ludicrous as far as I'm concerned, just listening to it. And I try and find people who are in support of this, but we don't get much from people because most people can't say a good word about them or are trying to justify them. I'm going to bring in my panel. I've got Lembit Opik and also John Gaunt, who want to also talk to you, Claire, as well about this, because, I mean, as Claire was saying, this, you know, her husband was killed and he was actually lying there with the other person on the motorway for a long time before anyone actually did anything about it.
Well, first of all, my deepest condolences to Claire and her family. It must just be horrific to keep having to relive that as well, even though she's doing some brilliant campaigning work around it. They should be rechristened unsmart motorways. They are totally dumb motorways. Of course you need a hard shoulder. And today I'd like to see more investment going into the road surfaces of motorways as well. I came down today from Coventry. It's about 82 miles. It was horrendous in this weather with the rain. I want to talk about it later. You know, a little bit of rain, well, it's a lot of rain today, but the UK comes to a standstill. Trains are being cancelled everywhere, but the motorways today, most people are aquaplaning. There would be massive problems, and as we all know, it's only that minor, as in Claire's case, a minor little shunt. You could be on the hard shoulder, and the next thing is you could be wiped out.
Yeah, Claire, your story is so tragic. I work with the Motorcycle Action Group, and bikers are told you just sit in your lane when you break down and wait for someone to come. So if you're in the fast lane, the outside lane, you're just meant to sit there. It's an incredibly dangerous situation. You've probably heard people say that these motorways actually have a lower accident rate than other roads. But I wonder what you feel about this. They've displaced the danger. Everyone knew what a hard shoulder was. You'd somehow get to there. Do you feel there's any redeeming quality for these at all, or should we just go back to hard shoulders?
Have your technology, have your gantries, have your lasers, have your sensors, but have it on top of a hard shoulder. The hard shoulder didn't have problems with its internet connection. The hard shoulder's firewall didn't clash with the virus protection. The hard shoulder didn't need every single control room operator looking in the right direction at the right time without 50 other tasks. It just worked. Whereas everything else, as we've seen in story after story, there's just a reason why that didn't work on that day and that didn't work on that day. I mean, I was actually told, because when I asked why the MIDAS system, which is actually in all smart motorways, which should have been able to tell when the whole motorway stopped, that actually was installed, nothing else. When I asked why even that didn't trigger, I was told that Jason died in the wrong place. So, I mean, when that's your reasoning, you know, you can die here, but you can't die here. You know, it's just, I mean, he was already dead, but it still took people phoning in to say, for the love of God, close the road. And this is carnage with just a few hundred miles. We've only got a few hundred miles of this at the moment. They're going to convert the entire country's roads into this, and it is going to be carnage.
Do you think, Claire, that anyone in government is taking you seriously? Are they dragging their feet? Are they going to actually do anything about this? Because I've read so many articles and so many people complaining about it, been on programmes where we've talked about it, but it doesn't seem as if those who are in charge, which ultimately is the government, of course, and the politicians, are actually doing anything about it. Sometimes you have to put your hands up and say, it was a great idea, but it doesn't work.
Exactly, that's what they need to do. So many people have died now. That would be the only decent thing to do, but they still won't do it. They've got too much invested. It was £50 million for the small contract in this area. These are massive, massive contracts. And these private companies vying for these contracts are applying a lot of pressure to the government. That is why they won't back down. They will not admit that they've made a massive mistake with the taxpayers' lives and the taxpayers' money.
Admit it, because your husband's life is worth more than £50 million. Sometimes in government, this is what comes with power. It's responsibility, and sometimes we haven't got politicians who do this, who can actually say, I messed that up. We got that wrong. Our advisors were incorrect, and we apologise to people like Claire and the hundreds of other people who have lost their lives.
Well, they won't do that.
They've got to, Nana. It doesn't matter how much money. It doesn't matter how much money.
It does to them. The whole reason they thought that they'd invest in these things is because they thought they were going to be saving money.
It's our money.
Well, it is our money. They thought they were going to be saving money, but I fail to see how having all these overhead cameras, first of all, then you've got the whole infrastructure, you've got the Dynac software, or Dynow software is what they're calling it. You've also got the gantries that you've got to put on there. You've then got the radar technology, and then you've got people in call centres and all over the country. I don't see how that can
But as Claire says, still have it, but have it on the hard shoulder.
Have it on top. I'm going to ask
the answer.
Claire. Well, Claire, I want to come back to you and ask you, you're doing this march in London, 38 coffins. Can you tell people a bit more about it?
Yes, the 38 coffins represents the accepted number between 2014 and 2019 killed on smart motorways. That is the latest data they have. Highways England record very, very little data on the carnage that they caused. So them figures are 2 years out of date already, obviously, and I don't even know if my husband is included in them figures. So we've got 38 coffins, and we've got a large banner to go across them saying, this is not even the full death toll. And we're going to be starting the march from Belvedere Road near London Eye. and we're going to be walking across Westminster Bridge, single file, carrying the coffins, because that's got to be a dramatic image. 38 coffins going single file across Westminster Bridge. And we're going to go to Parliament Square. And the idea is to humiliate the government and to make them acknowledge what is going on and the carnage that it's caused, because that's what it is. And that word was actually used to me the day that I was told, because I said, why has it taken you so long to find me? And because it'd been gone 4 hours by the time that I was told. And they said, you have to understand, sorry, that picture of him, you have to understand the carnage. We didn't know who was with which vehicle. We didn't know what came from where. You know, they had to ask us if we expected other people to be in the vehicles, because they just didn't know, because it was just spread so far and so wide. So we're then going to go on from Parliament Square to the Department for Transport building with the coffins, and we're going to do a static protest. But this is not going to involve any glue. It's not going to involve any disruption. We don't want to alienate the public. We want them on our side. We're trying to protect the public. This has already happened to me. I can't lose my husband again. I'm trying to stop other people losing their loved ones. So, yeah, that's it. We want to just hammer this message home. We want to make them take action, because I've had to resort to legal action, but the legal action has taken 2 years already, because legal wheels move slowly anyway, but a pandemic completely derails them. And it's taken 2 years to get this judicial review running, and Highways England are just slow timing us and stonewalling us, and they're just even not acknowledging us.
Well, Claire, they don't acknowledge us either, because I've tried to contact Highways England on many occasions, or National Highways as they're now called, to come and talk to us, and they have so far declined. Listen, thank you so much for joining us. I wish you all the best with your protest, and I really sincerely hope we get some progress with these smart motorways. Now, a spokesperson, that's Claire Mercer, who lost her husband on a smart motorway. Now, a spokesperson from the Department for Transport has said this: every death on our roads is a tragedy, and our thoughts remain with anyone who has lost a loved one. While data shows that fatalities are less likely on smart motorways than on conventional ones, we know some drivers can feel less safe on them. That's why we've tasked National Highways with implementing a raft of measures, including ensuring every new all-lane running motorway opens with technology to spot stopped vehicles.